Good afternoon. Hey, Matt. How you doing? Awesome. The idea of college athletes getting paid more than a scholarship for sports that they play has been a big debate for years. Now we often see these athletes endorsing products. The one locally that comes to mind is former University of Illinois basketball player Kofi Coburn doing commercials for OSF Healthcare. Does everybody remember seeing those last year during the season? The collegiate athlete name, image, and likeness rules, or NIL, have now included colleges hiring NIL directors, and Illinois State University in Normal is no exception. Maya Bulger was hired as Director of Name, Image, and Likeness and Community Engagement in June of this year in the Illinois State Athletics Department. Maya oversees the comprehensive NIL program at Illinois State, as well as managing all external community relationships. She's here today to tell us what this is all about and how it's handled, so please welcome Maya to the podium.
How are you guys?
Good.
I got it. We're good. Thank you, guys.
You can walk all the way.
No, it's fine. This is fine. All right. So first and foremost, I want to say thank you to Sean for inviting me here, and thank you guys for opening the stage for me to be able to tackle this concept and topic with you guys. I know it's a very complex one and not very many people understand it, but I'm happy to answer all questions and then just give you a little overview of what name, image, and likeness is and what we're doing here at Illinois State. Does that sound good?
Yeah. Sounds good.
Okay, so as Sean mentioned, I'm the Director of Name, Image, and Likeness and Community Engagement at Illinois State. So I oversee all of our visualized program, that's our comprehensive program, and also community engagement. So getting out, speaking to businesses, letting them know what's available to them, speaking to our student athletes, and also connecting them to the community. So how many of you guys actually know what name, image, and likeness is in this room? Okay, awesome. We got a few hands in the room. Okay, so I'm just going to go over the overall concept. So name, image, and likeness, or NIL, is the concept or the concepts that are under an individual's right of publicity. So everyone in here has a right of publicity, and you're entitled to your name, your image, and your likeness. So when I'm explaining name, image, and likeness, I always start with name. And I always start with, if you've ever been to a sporting event and you've bought a jersey of an athlete, that athlete's capitalizing on their name, right? Because that name is on the back of that jersey and you're specifically buying their name. So that's their name, they're capitalizing on that. When I bring up image, I always bring up how you look. That's your image. So if you buy a poster, a trading card, you play a video game with an athlete on it, that's them capitalizing on their image. When it comes to likeness, that's your status. Everyone has a status. So my status when it comes to work is I'm the Director of Name, Image, and Likeness. These student athletes have a status on campus, and that's the fact that they're on or a part of a collegiate team. So they're now able to capitalize on the fact that they have a following or audience based on their athletic ability. So as of July 1st of 2021, Illinois state law went into effect, and now student athletes are now able to receive compensation for fair market value for their name, image, likeness, and voice. And voice comes into play when you're speaking about podcasts or videos or anything like that. So this all started back in the late 200s with Ed O'Bannon. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with the Ed O'Bannon case. He was at a house, they were playing a video game, right? And this video game was called NCAA, and there's two versions. There's a football version and there was a basketball version. And basically, EA Sports, the owner of this game, had a NCAA team, right? And they would have like Illinois State on there, Oregon, Alabama, all Division I athletes on there, and you would be able to choose a team and play against another team. However, the only person that was capitalizing on this was EA Sports. So student athletes would have images of themselves, their team, their coaches, and people would be buying these games to utilize them, to play as them. They were receiving no money for it. And so he went to court with EA Sports. They ended up winning. And now we have this concept of why aren't student athletes making any of this money or taking any of that share when all these sports are making money off them. So then in 2019, California legislative put into law the Fair Play Act. And that stated that California athletes had the ability to make money and basically make money off of endorsements and promotions. NCAA didn't have a policy in effect for that, and they saw that as a problem. Because all student athletes were saying, hey, I'm just going to go to California rather than going to Alabama or University of Illinois because I can make money. So the NCAA had to quickly act, and that's how we got to 2021 in July. And now you see every state has their own NCAA policy in regards to name, image, and likeness. So like I mentioned, as of July 1st, 2021, student athletes can now make money off of their name, image, likeness, voice for doing endorsements and promotional items for businesses and companies. So at Illinois State, as of June 1st, when they hired myself, I oversee all of our Visualize program. And our Visualize program basically encompasses three main areas. The first one is education, the second one is professional development, and the last one is community engagement. And our whole idea of this program and the foundation of it is to protect and position our student athletes, right? Because there's a lot of businesses that come out here and say, hey, we're dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds. They don't know what they're signing away to. They don't know what they're doing. So we want to protect our student athletes. So we started with education, and that's a lot of what I'm doing now. And that's sitting with my teams and saying, hey, this is what name, image, and likeness is. These are NIL opportunities. This is what you need to look out for. This is what you can do. This is what you can't do. So we start there. I also go out to businesses in the local community, Rotaries like this one, and also just big events and educate businesses on how they can utilize these student athletes in this space. So then we move into the professional development aspect. And this is honestly my favorite part because there is a stigma surrounding name, image, and likeness where it's just, we're going to pay these student athletes $100,000 and we're already giving them a free scholarship. But honestly, name, image, and likeness is more than that, right? I had a student athlete come into my office and say, hey, I want to use my name, image, and likeness and donate 100% of the funds that I raise from my merchandise line to a local community center, right? And it's them being able to utilize their name and their image to impact a greater community. So I also had a student athlete come in and say, hey, you know, I'm a senior. I'm getting ready to go into the workforce and I need work clothes. Is there any way that I can do promotional activities and promote a business that has work clothes in exchange for me promoting their business in exchange for business clothes? So it's those things that encompass what name, image, and likeness is, right? And the professional development aspect comes in when you deal with taxes and financial literacy and financial management, right? Because these student athletes are going to have to report on their taxes, all these deals they're doing. So we bring in guest speakers to show them how to deal with financial literacy, how to deal with their money, how to deal with taxes. And that's honestly, I would say, the most rewarding aspect of all of this because I get to see them, you know, develop more as athletes, but as individuals and human beings. So it's more than, hey, I'm going to Illinois State to play a sport. And then once I graduate, I can figure everything out. But no, while I'm here, I'm actually taking away life skills that I'm going to use when I graduate. Lastly, we do community engagement. So student athletes come in and they say, hey, I have an audience of 18 to 25-year-olds who are interested in fitness. Do you know any businesses that have fitness apparel or like a Dunham's or a sporting company that would love to utilize me for my platform and my followers, but in exchange, I'll get fitness clothes or I'll get money in exchange for that. So being able to pair these student athletes up with a business that has the same audience as them has also been part of our community engagement aspect, and then getting them out in the community when they want to do things like give back and stuff like that. So our gymnastics team is also doing a candle line with a local business in Wisconsin, and they're giving 15% of their proceeds from all of that to the Women in Sports Foundation. So making sure that we actually position them to make those connections to make a bigger impact in the greater community. So that's a little bit about what our Visualize program is. I started in June 1. We launched the program July 11th. We launched our social media earlier today, and then our collective is launching sometime this week, maybe today, whenever they decide that they're ready to go. But we're just trying to make sure at Illinois State that when student athletes come to our university, that they're positioned to make the best decisions when it comes to this, right? Name, image, and likeness is not going away, and the law is the law. So it's our job to make sure that businesses know what they can do and our student athletes know what they can do to go out and make smart decisions, right? Because I don't want a student athlete coming in and they've signed away their rights for the rest of their life. So Illinois State wants to be very proactive with making sure that our student athletes were equipped to navigate the space. So I know I threw so much at you guys, and I know there's probably a lot of questions surrounding this space. I'm here to answer them all, so you guys can shoot them away.
You mentioned that education part, and we've heard the horror stories of the multi-million-dollar contract. 5 years later, they're broke. So what can you explain a little bit more about what that education is for the financial planning, the longevity? I know you had mentioned as speakers. Can you go a little more detail on that? The financial literacy, if you will, on a lot of these things.
Yes, so we're actually partnered with our business school, and they come in and they sit down with our student athletes. Well, student athletes can do one-offs with them if they want, but we bring them in as a whole group and they say, hey, these are the things you need to look out for. Here are the things that are available to you. You need to have a savings account. You can have a savings account. This is how you need to invest your money if you want to. I mean, right now, NFTs are something that are super big. So getting our student athletes exposed to NFTs, to stocks, to things like that, and different ways to invest, that's a large part about what we do.
So not the sports car right away.
No. No. And a lot of our programming will go, so the student athletes will meet with their individual teams, and then the student athletes will come to me and say, hey, I'm interested in this, right? I'm really passionate about it. And we have two individuals, myself who oversees the program, and then we have another individual who does all of their social media branding. So they'll meet with a social media branding coordinator, right? Clean up all their social media, figure out who their audience is, come to me, connect them with the businesses, and then we move on from there. So it's a process.
Question.
Yes.
I think this all happened because university presidents got greedy and used the NCAA to make it happen. But anyway, how do you compete? If I am a starting quarterback at Ohio State, I can get a $1 million NIL license or contract, which they've done. If I'm an athlete at Illinois State, my alma mater, by the way.
Love it. Go Birds.
I mean, is Monty's gonna, they can't compete with $1 million car dealership. How is Illinois State, Bradley going to compete with Alabama, Ohio State, schools like that?
Yep, I think a lot of that is just knowing your audience. Like I mentioned, I have student athletes who come in and say, hey, I just want to alleviate the extra stresses that I have anyway. I have a student athlete who goes and gets coffee from the local coffee shop literally every day. So she came in and said, hey, if I can promote this coffee shop when I come in every single day to buy my coffee and get that coffee for free that I was going to get in general, I'll gladly promote them. So it's knowing your student athletes. Like I've yet to have a student athlete come in and say, hey, I want $100 million. Right. They're just literally coming in and saying, hey, here are my needs. How can I utilize name, image, and likeness to alleviate those needs? And I think that's the beauty of name, image, and likeness, right? Because a lot of the press covers those $1 million deals or those $100,000 deals, but it's just knowing your audience. Our student athletes aren't coming out and saying, hey, I want a car or I want this. I'm sure they would love it. However, that's not what their mindset is. And I think there's a large area or a large group of individuals who are self-aware of their role, not their role, but their status as a student athlete compared to, your Alabama starting quarterback. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Yep. So based on kind of the size of the Missouri Valley and who you're competing against, kind of going off of that, would you say when you're out talking to these companies, as far as recruiting goes, are you focusing on one or two sports at Illinois State, typically the ones that are making the most money for your school, to be able to get the best players, or would you say you're pretty broad across the board in order to compete with the Big Ten and basketball, et cetera?
No, I feel like our businesses in campus are willing to support any student athlete. And that's the beauty of it. Our women's sport programs have been phenomenal. Like we're this is our third year winning the all conference NBC title. But when businesses come out, surprisingly, they'll say, hey, I want a student athlete who's a local student athlete, or I want a student athlete who has an interest in this particular topic or this particular industry, or if you have a student athlete who's in this major. So I feel like our businesses are being strategic in who they're picking rather than, hey, I just want the starting quarterback, right? And I think it's important because you don't want a student athlete who's just going to post and not care about it. You want a student athlete who actually has a connection to your mission and your values. And we do drive that home when we meet with our student athletes to say, hey, don't just try to pair up with the business just because you want to. You need to actually have a passion and a drive for the work that you're going to be doing for them. It's a two-way street.
So thank you for being here.
Yeah.
What's your background? Are you from Peoria? What have you done in the past? Are you athletic? You look athletic.
Yes, so I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. I completed my undergrad degree at TCU in sports journalism. I went on to work for a high school in their athletic department and covered all of their district sports. Moved on to, not TCU, Illinois State, worked in development, so fundraising, all of that good stuff. Left and worked for a sports agency, and then this position opened up and they brought me back. So I've jumped around a little bit, but I got my master's also from Illinois State too. So grad there.
Hi, how many opportunities are funneled through Illinois State, you know, be it an alumni network or something that's coming through the organization versus the athletes bringing the opportunities to you to discuss?
Almost all of our opportunities come through us just because our student athletes want to make sure they're working with credible companies and making sure that they're fulfilling everything they're supposed to be doing in the correct way. I do have a few student athletes who will say, hey, I accepted this, just want to put it on your radar. But majority of the time it goes through us as a department just to be safe and sure and make sure we're compliant. So, yeah.
So I have two questions. One, so is there, that you guys look at all the contracts, like say they sign them before they do it? That was one, because I think that's a big question. Like obviously you just talked about people signing something that they don't know. Like, do you guys have to look at everything to approve it from the athletic side? Is that an NCAA rule? And then you talked a little bit about the collective. You know, obviously I think that's a little bit different than a company. So can you talk a little bit about what the collective is? Because like Bradley just did theirs and had a signing last week for other basketball players. And to me, I didn't really understand what that was. It looks like everybody just got money because they came from sponsors or boosters. So if you can talk a little bit about what the collective is.
Yes, so a collective is a third-party entity, so it's completely separate from the athletic department, and it's a group of fans, alumni, donors, whoever wants to be involved. They collectively fundraise a pot of money, and they distribute it to the student athletes that are contracted with the collective. However, the student athlete has to complete some service to get that money. So whether the student athlete is doing a meet and greet, an autograph session, or hosting an event at a business, or doing a social media campaign, they have to do something for that money. But yeah, Bradley released theirs for the men's basketball program, and that's what their donors are doing. But the first question, I can't remember what it was. Can you repeat it?
Whenever you guys, like they sign a contract, is there laws by the NCAA that it has to have certain things in it? Because like the collective, I guess my follow-up on that would be, is there a minimum that they have to do, or is there like a value? Because I could literally say, hey, do a meet and greet, I'm going to give you $25,000 for a 10-minute meet and greet. That doesn't make sense as an operator. But those are rules that kind of collect, especially if collective, are there rules in place that protect people from just basically saying, hey, do this for me for an hour and it's worth $30,000. Like, I don't know if there's any rules that kind of protect it, because to me, they're opening up Pandora's box. That you look at the Alabamas, they're going to pay a kid $1 million and he's going to sign autographs for 10 minutes. So is the NCAA protecting that, or is it basically just a free for all that you can do? Basically, these places are going to do whatever they want.
Yep. So the rule is to get something, you have to do something, regardless of what that something is. That's between the business owner and the student athlete. Yep. Yes. So that is the rule. However, do things come through our department? Yeah, we have to approve it. If it's anything over $500 that you're doing or getting money, it has to have a contract. If it's not, it doesn't. They just have to disclose it to your university. So we check for anything that's NCAA, non-regulated or anything like that.
Yeah, and that was it was almost the exact same question, was the what's to keep, you know, I guess, does this essentially put an end to some of the programs where they were, giving kids houses and cars? I mean, you're essentially doing that now, basically. I mean, does this pretty much put an end to that?
It doesn't. It just makes it a little bit more regulated. Just a little bit more regulated.
Does it end the NCAA? I mean, is this their way of basically getting out of the NCAA? Because it feels like this is where it's going.
Not necessarily. The NCAA is always going to want to have their hands in everything, but I feel as if the NCAA doesn't want to put too many regulations in place, so not everyone's turning on them. Because the original argument was that the NCAA should be paying student athletes, right? And that institutions should be paying athletes because institutions are getting all those ticket sales, right? So that was the original argument. Now we're here with name, image, and likeness as a response.
Sorry for
And the
another
NCAA
question.
is not paying.
But that's my question. What chance does Illinois State now have recruiting students when Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, they are going to have such a competitive recruiting advantage
Mhm.
over all the other schools? How's that going to change college athletics and recruiting?
Yeah, so every student athlete can't go to your Michigan, your Alabama, and your bigger schools. So there's always gonna be a market for Illinois State, right? It's just a matter of being the best in your conference, right? So when I have recruits come in and they say, hey, why would I come here instead of Southern Illinois? Or why would I come here instead of Bradley? Well, Illinois State was one of the first institutions to have 2 people dedicated to NIL, or NIL. We have an actual comprehensive program, and there's no other school in our conference that has one of those. So being able to jump the gun and get in front of other schools in this space is your recruiting tool. But like I mentioned, not everybody can go to Michigan, not everybody can go to Alabama. So there's always going to be that market. Yeah.
I read something about the problem with international students, and schools like Bradley have, they can put 5 guys on the floor that don't come from the United States
Right.
here on student visas. What can you do for those students to kind of equal what their US teammates are doing?
Yeah, so because of their visas, right, and that has nothing to do with the institution or anything like that, that's actual law. Those student athletes cannot do NIL opportunities in the United States. However, if they go home during spring break or over the summer or Christmas break, they're able to do those opportunities while they're there. So they still have the opportunity to do it, it's just a little bit harder. Anybody else?
Does that change with the collective? Like for Brad, like he talked about Bradley, so there's 5 kids on Bradley that are foreign players.
Mhm.
Does a collective make that difference? Like say Bradley has their collective, can they use the international players or they're still out?
Yeah, they're still out. But I mean, there's a lot of basketball programs that travel when they do their tournaments. So if they want to, that student athlete can do it while they're out there traveling. So there's ways to make it happen. It just is a little extra work. Just a little extra work.
Smoke and mirrors.
Thank you guys so much.